One of the biggest questions in Star Wars was just answered.
Thank you!
The connection between the Stranger and the Knights of Ren was just confirmed by Leslye Headland, and what this might mean for a possible future for this character in live action will blow your mind, because this news might actually lead to us getting more of the Stranger. Probably not in an Acolyte Season 2, but possibly in a Darth Plagueis show. Okay, before you go, Mike, that's absolutely insane. That's never going to happen. Hear me out, because this confirmation of who the Stranger really is will not only allow a continuation of his story, but in a really crazy way, it might actually help this Hunt for Ben Solo movie get made. All right, I know this all sounds crazy, but bear with me. Let's start with what Leslye Headland just confirmed. The Acolyte ended over a year ago, and although the final episode left us with a ton of cliffhangers with the possibility of a second season, however, just a few short weeks after that finale ended, the hopes and dreams of an Acolyte Season 2 were destroyed. The cancellation of the Acolyte Season 2 still hurts me to this day. However, that's not at all what we're here to talk about, because one of the biggest questions from the Acolyte that just got answered was at the end of episode 5. After one of the greatest lightsaber duels in all of Star Wars, you can hear Kylo Ren's theme as the Stranger walks towards Osha. Take a listen.
We are.
I know, crazy, and at the time, Star Wars fans lost their minds, coming up with some crazy theories, the biggest one being that the Stranger, or Qimir, would eventually be the first ever member of the Knights of Ren. And now that crazy fan theory was just confirmed by the showrunner, as we just learned from the Art of the Acolyte book, as Leslye Headland told us this. It was in the design of the character, as well as knowing that we were going to introduce Darth Plagueis, who has to end up with Palpatine as his apprentice, following the Rule of Two, a precept that limits the Sith to just two at any given time, a master and an apprentice. One way to keep it going is if the Stranger is the first Knight of Ren, part of the Sith adjacent cult that we know eventually survives. Yeah, so this not only answers the question of why is Kylo Ren's theme playing at the end of episode 5, but it also explains the Plagueis scene. Because we never got an Acolyte Season 2, we didn't know what Darth Plagueis was even doing in that cave. Was he looking over his apprentice? Was he scouting to try and find a new apprentice? Or was he concerned that the Stranger was exposing too much of the dark side to the Jedi Order, and possibly blowing his cover? Well, this Art of the Acolyte book just explained it all. Although it's not directly explained to us in the Acolyte Season 1, we learn that Qimir is really old. He explains to Osha that he was once a Jedi a really long time ago, and we assume his master was Venestra Rose, as she has this lightsaber whip that's pretty badass, and Qimir, or the Stranger, has these whip scars on his back. Whatever falling out these two had, it was a bad one, and it left Venestra Rose thinking that Qimir was dead this entire time. Quick little side note, I know not everybody wants the Acolyte Season 2, but it's really crazy that one of the coolest characters in Star Wars doesn't even have a name. Qimir was just an alias that he used at the beginning of the season. And then we learn that his name is the Stranger. That's just a title, that's not a name.
I was never given a name.
I guess we'll never know. At least, not for now. So what Leslye Headland just told us is that the Stranger is not a Sith Lord. He is not a part of the Rule of Two that is going on right now, and the Master and Apprentice currently in the galaxy are Darth Tenebrous and Darth Plagueis. Plagueis being the master of Palpatine, who we eventually see rule the galaxy for the majority of the Skywalker saga. So the Rule of Two technically is supposed to limit you to 2 Sith in the galaxy. However, those rules are bent all over the place. In the Clone Wars, we see Palpatine with his apprentice Dooku and his apprentice Asajj, or his apprentice Savage. Even Palpatine has Darth Maul as his apprentice, while Plagueis is still his master. And it's not like there's no other dark side users in the galaxy either. During the time of the Clone Wars, you have Darth Maul. Even during the time of the Empire, when you have Palpatine as the Emperor of the galaxy and his apprentice, Darth Vader, you still have red lightsaber wielding Inquisitors. So although the Rule of Two is technically still in place, that doesn't mean there can't be other dark side users. And that brings us to the Stranger, because that's exactly what he is. When Plagueis is looking out of this cave, he's not looking at his apprentice. He's not looking at his even future apprentice. He's looking at a problem. Because as it's explained here, the Stranger eventually becomes the first Knight of Ren, a Sith adjacent cult, which we know survives until the sequel trilogy where it gets a new leader by the name of Kylo Ren. Now, before we get to why I think the Darth Plagueis show could actually happen, let's talk about how this affects the hunt for Ben Solo. So if you've been living under a rock for the last week, then you don't know that Adam Driver recently came out and said that there was a Hunt for Ben Solo movie. It was in development for over 2 years, with Oscar-winning director Steven Soderbergh attached. When Driver and Soderbergh pitched it to Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, Dave Filoni, and Carrie Beck all loved it. They paid $3 million to get a full script made, and that script was written completely. They were ready to shoot. And when they took this entire pitch and brought it to Disney to Bob Iger and Alan Bergman, they said no, saying that they didn't think that Ben Solo could still be alive after he died at the end of Rise of Skywalker.
Ironic.
So after over 2 years of work on a project that Kathleen Kennedy, Dave Filoni, Carrie Beck, Adam Driver, Steven Soderbergh all loved, it was gone. And until 7 days ago, when Adam Driver revealed all this information to the fans, this movie was dead. Until he gave it to the fans. Recently, you've seen planes flying around Disney Studios with a banner that says save, hashtag, the hunt for Ben Solo. Or even Star Wars fans getting together over $10,000 to put a billboard on Times Square that says no one's ever truly gone. Hope lives, Ben Solo's alive, hashtag the hunt for Ben Solo. There's even posters being put up all across America right now outside of Disneyland, outside of Disney Studios, that are like missing dog posters, but instead of a dog, it's Ben Solo. And although all that is awesome, and I really hope this Hunt for Ben Solo movie actually happens, it proves that Star Wars fans have a ton of power and we can use it for good. So, of course, give me some hashtag Hunt for Ben Solos, hashtag Ben Solo lives in the comments below. But I'm sure you're screaming, Mike, how the hell does the Hunt for Ben Solo connect to the stranger in the Acolyte? Okay, I'll get to it. I just mentioned a few very important details. While the Hunt for Ben Solo was being made over the course of 2 years, Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni both loved it. During this time, 2 shows were being created that I think were set to connect to this Hunt for Ben Solo movie. One being the Ahsoka series, where they introduced to live action The World Between Worlds and gave us the perfect explanation for how Ben Solo could survive. We could see him get pulled into the World Between Worlds by his former master Luke Skywalker, give him one last lesson and bring him back to life. But the other project was The Acolyte, a project that takes place about 90 years before The Phantom Menace, and yet it's heavily connected to something that takes place after the sequel trilogy. Yeah, that's right. Because although the Knights of Ren die in The Rise of Skywalker, a lot of the Hunt for Ben Solo would be flashbacks. It would be a lesson going back in time, just like Ahsoka and Anakin in The World Between Worlds go back to the Clone Wars. And this would allow us to see how Ben Solo got in touch with the Knights of Ren, how he became their leader, and all things Knights of Ren being explained. Possibly even mentioning or physically seeing the stranger and explaining how he was the first ever Knight of Ren and how badass of a character he was. So at the same time they were developing the Hunt for Ben Solo, they created the Acolyte series. And in episode 5, they put this at the end.
We are.
Coincidence? I think not!
Which brings us perfectly to the Darth Plagueis show. An Acolyte Season 2, as much as I would love it, I know is likely to never happen. The fact that the first season, before its first episode even dropped, had a 13% on Rotten Tomatoes, I mean, that alone just tells you that if they ever announced an Acolyte Season 2, it would get so much hate. And I understand that. So whether you like the show or you don't, it doesn't really matter. You're probably never going to get a second season. But that doesn't mean that the stories of these characters, of Vanestra Rho, the Stranger, Osha, have to end. It doesn't mean that the first time we ever see Plagueis in live action in this one very short scene has to be the last. For well over a decade, Star Wars fans have been begging for 2 specific projects: a young Palpatine show and a Darth Plagueis show. So instead of announcing the Acolyte Season 2 and getting the insane amount of backlash from the Star Wars fandom, Lucasfilm could announce a Plagueis show. Get all of the hype from the Star Wars fans who've been waiting for this for years. And for those Acolyte fans, you can finish off the story. You could even have an epic lightsaber duel between Plagueis and the Stranger. It would explain that Plagueis is a part of the Rule of Two, and it could give us the canon version of Plagueis killing Tenebrous and going to find Palpatine, his new apprentice, on Naboo. And if it's multiple seasons, it could eventually transition into a young Palpatine show and end with Palpatine killing Plagueis. This would not only please everybody, Acolyte fans, Plagueis fans, Palpatine fans, but it would give you the opportunity to set up the Knights of Ren, something that eventually leads into the sequel trilogy, tying a string from the very end of the Skywalker saga to the beginning, making the entire timeline feel so much more connected. And let's be honest, who the hell doesn't want a Darth Plagueis show? So it's finally been confirmed. We weren't losing our minds. That is the Kylo Ren theme at the end of episode 5 of The Acolyte, and it's there for a reason. That reason being the stranger is the first ever Knight of Ren. He is not a part of the Sith rule of two. Plagueis is there watching him to make sure that he doesn't out the Sith to the Jedi. So with that being said, tell me in the comments below. 1, are you satisfied with this answer? Are you happy that he's the first ever Knight of Ren? 2, do you want The Acolyte Season 2 to still happen? Or 3, are you okay with a Darth Plagueis show that ties up all the loose ends from The Acolyte, explains what happens with Osha, and maybe, just maybe, gives us an incredible lightsaber duel between Plagueis and the Stranger? And are you just as crazy as I am, and you think that the hunt for Ben Solo being in active development while The Acolyte was in active development led to this connection between the two projects that take place on opposite sides of the Skywalker timeline? Tell me in the comments below, and if you want more on that Hunt for Ben Solo movie, I explain everything that's going down in this video right here.